Here we turn to Daf Yud Beis on Yud Beis. What is Misnameh? Nim v'lo nim. He's sleeping, but he's not sleeping. Tir v'lo tir. He's awake, but he's not awake. He's somewhere in that twilight zone between being asleep and being awake. We can call it a snooze, call it a power nap. I don't know what you want to call it in our terms. The Kari Levion, if you call his name out, boom, he wakes up. V'lo yada adure svara. If you ask him, give me a little bit of a piece of logic, chidush. He doesn't know. He's half asleep. But if you arouse his memory, did you hear such and such a thing? Then he immediately wakes up. Rav Kana, Rav. Of kindness, a person accepted upon himself as an individual a kindness. And he's not sure what kind of kindness he accepted upon himself. Was it kindness yochid, which begins in the morning? Was it a kindness tzibur, which begins even at night? So in such a case, we have to go l'chum. And he's also been an ilas sandal. Neil Sandal here is just one example of all the nuyim, the Kashamita and Rechitza and so forth, that all are the package deal that include in a kindness tzibur. Chayshina and Shema kindness tzibur kibul olah. So the Gemara says, Heichi lefet. How should he be makabel on himself in kindness to avoid such a suffix? Amar Rabba Bar Shilo le'mahachi should say the following declaration of Machar, Ahei lefanecha b'tainis yachid. By adding the words tainis yachid explicitly indicates that he will not accept upon himself to fast at night, nor will he accept upon himself the Yisonil Sasandal and all the other inuyim in the package. So in the absence of an explicit limitation, stating explicitly that he's only interested in a tainis yachid, we have to worry and be concerned that when he used the word tainis, and he said ahei b'tainis, he meant a tainis tzibur. So we're up to now Amru Le Rabbanan, the Rav Sheshes. So now the Chachamim talk to Rav Sheshes. Hakachazinon Rabbanan de Misaime Misanayu v'Osli Lebei Tanis. We see that certain scholars will tie their shoes and come with their shoes on to the Beis HaKnesses where they're fasting. Everyone's getting together for a fast, and it's a tainis tzibur. So how could it be that a tainis tzibur generates an iser, a prohibition of nilas sandal, yet we see chachamim that come to the Beis HaKnesses on a tainis and they're wearing their shoes? So apparently, just to explain why they were doing so, we have a principle of ein gozrin tainis tzibur bebavel. And these chachamim hold that in Bavel, we don't have all the chumros and those strictures that apply to a tainis tzibur. But nevertheless, when Rav Sheshes got wind of this, ikpan, he was makpid, v'yamalahu, and he said to those chachamim, Dilma meichal nami yochel, maybe you also ate, as if to ridicule them in a facetious way. Maybe you, not only did you tie your shoes on a tainis tzibur, which you're not allowed to do, but you ate on a tainis tzibur. And basically, you are being poresh midarke atzibur. Abai v'rova ma'ayle, when they came into the Beis HaKnesses on a day of tainis, ki mesaime apanta, when they were tying their shoes, they would wear a special kind of nal, which is called a apanta, a nal kala with a kuf. And this kind of what word can I use? A kind of very, it wasn't made of leather. It was kind of like a slipper, I guess you'd call it. You can find a better word. Let me just see if by chance he gives a better definition of apanta here in the English. says, the upper part of a shoe. That's how he translates upon. Let me just see in the footnote. He doesn't add anything in the footnote. But in any event, in the Masechet, he says that it's a na'al kala she'ein lo or. It's not made of leather. Like today, we have Crocs and sneakers, all sorts of different slippers that are not made of leather. Meremar, now the Gemara is giving other minhagim of the Chacham on a Taanit Tzibur, Umar Zutra, mechalfe diamina l'smol, usmol diamina. They would wear the left shoe on their right foot and vice versa. All this is to indicate a shinui, some sort of a change in the ilas hamin olav, so that they would not be held responsible in the kapeda of Rav Sheshes for violating a Taanit Tzibur. Rabbanan debate Rav Ashi, the Talmidim that learned to the base Masechet Rashi, nafka ki or chayil. When they went to the shul, they were wearing on a Taanit Tzibur regular shoes. They didn't have any shinui whatsoever. And orchayu means kedarka. Why? The savre ki hadi amashmua ain Taanit Tzibur b'bava. They took this statement of Shmuel to its logical conclusion that a Chaloshem Taanit Tzibur with the Iser Inui and the Ilas Hasandal does not exist in Bava. And any other Chumrah that would apply to a Taanit Tzibur does not apply to Bava. Ela Tisha B'Av, the only day in Bava which can be commemorated and classified as a full-fledged Kiyum Taanit Tzibur is Tisha B'Av, and that requires fasting at night before the day, as well as refraining from the 5 categories of Inu. Rabbi Yehuda Amarav. What happens in a case where a person accepted upon himself a tainus, and he realizes that it's going to be hard for him to fast? Lova Adam Tanisa Uporeh. He's allowed to desist from fasting on the day that he was supposed to fast. He was makabel on himself on that day, but he's got to pay up a chol. He has to fast another day to replace the day that he was obligated to fast by virtue of his personal Kabbalah, and that substitute will be a fulfillment of his neder. When this halacha was said in front of Shmuel, he disagreed. Amarli, v'chi neder kivel alei delo sagi delo mishalim. Is this really a neder? Okay, he was makabel on himself to fast. He didn't mean with all the dinim of a tainus. Let's see, you're nafshe kivel alei. His kabbalah's tainus was only to be mitzayer himself, either as part of tshuva or to identify with the tzar of the tzibur, whatever it might be. And therefore, id motzi mitzayer nafshe. If he can fast and be mitzayer himself, then let him afflict himself. But id lo motzi, if he cannot fast, lo mitzayer nafshe. He's not obligated in a tainus. He never accepted upon himself a tainus. He only accepted upon himself to be mitzayer himself, and therefore he's not mechuyv to be poreach chov and add a fast day to replace this fast day. He was never obligated in a fast. However, there's another lishna in Shmuel, Ika Diamri, and according to this transmission, Amrav Yudam Arav Lova Adam Tanitzo Poreh and Ki Amrita Kame de Shmuel, Amali Pshita. Instead of Shmuel rejecting this halacha and dissenting, he asked, well, what are you telling me? There's no chiddush over here. It's partial. A person can substitute another day and be porez chov. Why did Rav have to teach me this? Lo yehei ella neder. Let's talk about a classic neder. A person's Kabbalah's Taanit is like a neder. Even that's a chum to consider Kabbalah's Taanit a neder. But lema zogen, I'll grant you it's a neder. But neder milo motzi l'shlume umezel l'machar. If a person took upon himself a neder, and right now he cannot fulfill his neder, so can't he fulfill his neder tomorrow, Yom Achrina, on another day? And therefore, the same thing applies to Taanit. He doesn't have to fast today on the day that he accepted the Taanit. He accepted upon himself a fast. And he'll fast whenever he wants to fast. So Rav is not teaching me anything new. It's very logical. And we're going to place the Kabbalah's Taanit into the perspective of a neder. And when a person takes upon himself a neder, he can fulfill that neder on any day that he so chooses. Rav Yehuda Brei Rav Idi Ikla Lebei Rav Asi. At one point, Rav Yeshua came to the house of Rav Asi. Avadule Egla Tilsa. They prepared a very beautiful banquet as a Kabbalah's panim for Rav Yeshua. And what was it? Igla Tilsa. This is the best veal that you can buy. It's an egel, which is the third egel in the birth of the calves. Let's just see how he formulates it. He says, egel shenolad shlishi le'imo, because the Vlad Rishon, the Vlad Sheni is Ketana v'Chalosha. And the real strong egel is the third egel. So anyway, they prepared him a luxurious banquet. So they said to him, Lito mar midi. Now a master should taste something from this lavish meal. Amalei v'tanise yasivna. I'm in a state of Taanit. Imagine he scheduled a Taanit knowing that they would prepare this beautiful banquet for him. So on Mulay, they said to him, what's the big deal? All right, so you're in a state of Taanit. Well, why not just decide to postpone your Taanit and you'll make it up by Biporei Yechol? Lo savar mar, velozif mar velifre. Let him borrow, so to speak, this Taanit for payment for another day. Lo savar le mar, do you not hold that you're allowed to pay up a chov and replace the day? And we prepared this beautiful banquet on your behalf. Amar lahu, my Taanit is not a regular Taanit. Taanit chalom. I had a very bad dream, and I'm very upset about it. And the only way I could be mavatal that dream and nullify its negative predictions is if I fast. So I can't be mavatal this fast. And Tosas says that Taanit is mevatel gzardin sheheralo b'chalom. Whatever gzardin he saw in his dream was revealed to him, then Taanit will undermine that decree. So now we really don't understand what's going on. The Gemara in Sanhedrin says, "Divrei chalomos ein ma'alim v'lo moridim." We don't believe in dreams. The Gemara tells us in Masechet Brachos, for example, that Shmuel saw in a chalom a very bad thing, and he used to declare chalomos shav yidaber pasukim Zechariah Navi, that dreams all a shav. He says, "Eina kavana shekasher odom cholin chalom ra eino tzarich lisanos." It doesn't mean that if he had a bad dream, he doesn't have to fast. Ela imu roes atzmo nivhal v'nitchad me'achalom hara roilo lochash lezelis anos ulevatel zagzera. The very fact that he had such a jarring experience and he was in terror as a result of this terrible dream, that itself indicates that it's a sima min hashamayim, that there is some sort of gzera. Therefore, even though chalom is generally speaking lo mailav lo mirmo reading. But if you had such a reaction to your dream and you're in a state of pachad, then apparently that's proof that there was a gzera in Shamayim, and you have to be mevatel it by fasting. Amar Rav bar Rachasi, Amar Rav Chama bar Guri, Amar Rav Yofe Taanit l'chalo. Fasting is very effective vis-a-vis a bad dream. Che'esh lina ores, like there was a psolas of pishtan of the flax, and you just lit it, and it went up in fire, completely consuming. And when you say that the taanit, the fasting is effective to be mevatel the chalom, that's only if he fasts bo bayom. What does that mean, bo bayom? Rashi and the Ritva explain that kodem shetiskara daito v'yasir pachad milibo. That when is the taanit effective? When he's in that state of shock, of terror. Because then the taanit is mevatel through tshuva, the gzeira. But not to postpone it. Now this is a pella. Shabbos has a mitzvah of oneg, and yet a taanit chalom can override the mitzvah of oneg Shabbos. You're allowed to fast the taanit chalom even on Shabbos. So there are more rights when he paskins this halacha that the reason for that is that this is his oneg. To force him to eat when he's in that mental state of fear, that would not be oneg. But if he fasts, then paradoxically for him on a subjective level, that fast itself becomes a kiyum of oneg. However, there is a mitzvah of oneg b'toras achila, and that he didn't fulfill. What does he do as a takana for the fact that he did not fulfill the achila of oneg Shabbos? Leisvei tanisa l'tanisa. In addition to the fast that he's going to fast now to be mevatel the gzeira of the chalom ra, he will also have to pick up another fast to be mechaper as a tikkun, as tshuva, for the fact that he was not makayim the mitzvah of oneg Shabbos, for the bittul of oneg Shabbos. Now, in the Mishnah back on Daf Yud, once Rosh Chodesh Kislev came about, and there was no Gsham, and Beis Din would add another 3 taanios that were incumbent upon the entire tzibur, and they would be allowed to eat and drink at night. And the minhag of the niyug of taanit was postponed till the day, and there's no iser inu. Avru elu. Now the Mishnah says that the first set of taanios have passed, and those were the taanios that they decreed on Rosh Chodesh Kislev. V'lo nanu, there was no gishamim. Beis Din goes from sholosh taanios acheros ala tzibur, another set of 3 taanios, and these are more strict than the first set of Higia Rosh Chodesh sholosh taanios. In what sense was it more chamur? Ochlin v'shosim mibojom. They're only allowed to eat and drink before nightfall. But when the sun sets, with nightfall, they have to start fasting. And asurim b'malacha. Not only that, they're not allowed to do malacha. The Gemara is going to have a problem with this. Why is there an isur malacha? What does that have to do with taanit? And now we have the 5 inuyim. Rechitza, sicha, nilsa sandal, tashlamita, and we had achilin shasiya. All this becomes awesome. And therefore, to be absolutely guaranteed that people didn't bathe on that taanit tzibur, they had to lock up the bathhouses because people used to take baths. Avru elu. Now, these taanios of the second round, the sholosh taanios acheros, still didn't bring about the expected, the hopeful result, and there was no response from Shamayim with Urias. Bezdin goes on Alem Od Sheva Taanit. Another set, this time 7 fast days. And now if we calculate all the fast days of the Tzibur, we're not including the first 3, remember the Yechidim, if it didn't start raining before the beginning of Cheshvan, is then Shloshes Tainios al Tzibur. They're the first 3 from Rosh Chodesh Kislev, then we added another 3, and finally another 7, totaling 13. I was always wondering if the number 13 is significant here in this context, because it might reflect on the 13 Midas Harachim. However, I didn't see anyone who says that. Now the Mishnah explains the din of the 7 Taanits, the last set. Harei elu yiseros al rishonos. These have a chumrah that we didn't find in the beginning. The other 6 Taanits. Shebe'elu, with regard to the last 7, that set masriim, we blow a trua with a shofar. And not only that, v'nolim esachanuyos, and we lock up the stores. No shops will be open. V'sheni matin im chashecha v'chamisha mutarim mipnei kvod haShabbos. If he's fasting on a Monday, because again these 7 fast days will be Monday, Thursday, Monday, etc., then we will be mates hadelas hachanus. We will sort of close the door a little bit. We'll leave it open or drop. Im chashech. And now we're talking about at the end of the times, so that the doors of the chanuyos were locked, as we saw before, but we would open them before the end of the times to allow people to supply themselves with machal umishte, so that they could break their fast right after nightfall. V'chamishi mutarim, on a fast on a Thursday, we would allow the stores to be open, supermarkets and mini markets and so forth, for the entire day, even though it's a tainis chom. That's because the Kavod Shabbos want to give people an opportunity to buy whatever they need for Shabbos. The Mishnah continues. Avru, now even the 7 tainios passed. The low nan. I mean, you can almost cry. I mean, there's still no rains are coming down. I mean, this is like Rosh Chodesh Av. We diminish all of our business transactions and binyan and the building of a house, ubenetia and planting trees, and we diminish erusin and nesuin. This is not an appropriate time for marriage. And the Chiddush is even erusin is prohibited. Usually erusin is not a stira kavelu, because there's no simcha. The Rambam writes that this halacha of leaving out marriages during this period of time only applies to someone who already was married and he already fulfilled the mitzvah period of rivia. But says the Rambam, if he hasn't yet been makayim the mitzvah period of rivia, he's allowed to be ma'ares and even lisa isha. She'ela shalom. We diminish she'ela shalom. As if we were rejected chashon by Hashem because God did not respond to our tainios. But this is the end. After this, there will be no more fasting on the part of Yechidim. I mean, on the part of the Tzibur, I should say. And we'll see why. But HaYechidim, Talmidei Chachamim, Chozin Umisanim, they can continue fasting on Sheni V'Chamishi Ad sheyetze Nisan until the end of Nisan. Yotza Nisan v'lo yardu geshamin siman klola, and therefore even the Talmidei Chacham, the Yechidim, will not fast after the month of Nisan because rains at that period of time is siman klola, and we'll prove it from Shmuel Shenema in the rebuke that Shmuel gives to Klal Yisrael when they requested a king, and they didn't rely on Shmuel himself that he would protect them. It says in the Pasuk, "Tzir chitim hayom," and Shmuel is showing them the power of tefillah. And the Maisa was on the 1st of Nisan, which is the time for Tzir chitim, and Geshamim at that time is a siman klal. And Shmuel says, nevertheless, Hashem will listen to my response of tefillah, and He will let it rain, even though it's a klal. This was the rebuke of Shmuel. You don't want to rely on me. You want to appoint the king. Why do you have to do so? If you don't believe me, I'll show you what the koch of tefillah is. And I can bring down rains even during Nisan when it's a klal. The Gemara says, Bishleim akulu. I understand all these surim, ispahu, tainuk, because these actions, if you involve yourself in these actions, you engage in them, you are bringing yourself to a state of kindness, and therefore you should afflict yourself and abstain from rechitza, sicha, nil, sasandal, tashamita, so that you don't violate the iser of tainuk b'tainus. Aval malach. I wouldn't say that getting involved in malacha is such a great tainug. Sarhu, it's a hassle to go to work. You got to get a train in the morning, and you got to be there from 9 to 5, and you have to get along with all the people there in your workforce, so forth. So there are a million different pressures during work. So why do you say that? It's too much of a tainug to allow you to go to work on a tainus. And the Gemara is not assuming that the tainus is endowed with kedusha sayom like a yontif or a Shabbos. Omer Rav Chizda, Omer Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba, Omer Kra. The pasuk says in Yoel, when the Navi speaks to Klal Yisrael to be kovea and establish a tainus, because during Yoel there was the worst plague of arbe. How do you say arbe in English? Locust. Locust. And he said to them, Kidshu tzom, Kiruat Sora, Ismu Tuzkanen. And the words Kidshu tzom seem to indicate that tainus has a din of kiddush. I don't know. Or maybe kiddush just means here in this concept, lahazmin, to sing aloud and designate the day. But it says Kiruat Sora. Call it a day of Atzara. Atzara means to desist from malacha, like Chag HaShavuos is called Atzeres. Atzeres. Ma Atzeres also basis malacha. Af tainus also basis malacha. So Gemara asks, Ma Atzeres me urta. Af tainus nami me urta. If you're equating tainus with Atzeres, and therefore there's an Isur malacha, let's equate it all the way through with Atzeres, and therefore he should have to start his fast at night. Omer Rabbi Zera. I'll explain to you what he had in mind. On my Kra, the Torah says in that very same pasuk in Yoel, Ismu Zkenim, gather together the elders. We'll see in a minute why we gather the elders on a fast day. But in any event, Dumiyad Asifas Zkenim. And we have to equate it with Asifas Zkenim. And when do we gather together this Zkenim? That's on the day of times. Masechet Zkenim be Yom, meaning Yom and not Laila. Everyone is at home in his own private home at night. We don't gather together the people at night. It's af, even with regard to Isur Malacha, Som Nami Bayom. The Laila is excluded from the Isur Malacha. So the Gemara asks the following question: the Ema. Mitiara. Maybe we should start the tainus in the afternoon. Tiara means Sahare Hayom, because you're equating it with Asifas Canaan. And If the Isser Malacha on a Yom Tainus is similar to Asifas Kedim, why do you begin with daybreak? Why not postpone the Isser Malacha until the afternoon? Rav Sheshem Bered Rav Idi, Messiah Rav Huna Diyama Mitzafra Kinufya. This would support Rav Huna's opinion that on a day of Tainus Kinufya, which we'll see what that means, begins with daybreak. Kinufya means to gather and assemble the people together. So the Isers of Malacha, similar to Asifas Kenim, applies in the morning. Mar says, Heiki Avdi, what were these Kenim doing? You gathered together this Kenim, the elders, for what purpose? From daybreak until midday, this Kenim were in charge of scrutinizing and evaluating what was going on in the city. They would doresh v'choker, what was going on in the Bnei Ha'ir. Is there gezel? Is there thievery or Hamas b'neihem? And if there is, we should be mefais the nigzal. Is mikan from midday v'yelech going on? Riva diyoma. We have the third quarter of the day, which is the quarter from midday for an add 3 hours. Is karinan b'sifra. We read from the Sefer Torah. The afterata, and we read the maftir from the Novi. When we can v'elech, what about the last quarter of the day? Be'inan rachmei, we're involved in supplication, asking God to have mercy on us and bring down the rains and terminate the drought. Shenemar, and how do we know that Asifas Kedim is Bereva Yom Korban Torah, Baftorah, Reva Yom Vakshim Rachamim? How do we know all this? Because with regard to the Taanit of Bnei Yisrael, when they did Shuvah in Sefer Nehemiah, it says Vayakumu al Omdom, Vayikru b'Sefer Torah Hashem Elokehem, Revius Hayom. Ubervius misvadim umishtachvim lashem elokechem. So the day itself is broken up into these different parts of the day. So we'll have Kriyas HaTorah, we'll have, that's in the first Revius, then we'll have a Revius of Vidui, and then we'll go on to Asifas Kenim, and so forth. So let's just finish it up. In the next 2 minutes here on Daf Yud Gimel and Alf, the Gemara is going to ask, okay, we learned from this pasuk that Reva Yom is Kriyas HaTorah, Haftorah as well. Then we have Reva Yom in Bakashas Racham. But doesn't say explicitly what we try to prove, that this is in the second half of the day, that the Kriyas HaTorah and Haftorah and the Bakashas Racham is the second half of the day, and in the morning we're busy being Ma'ayin Binyoni Ha'ir. Why don't I switch this around? Maybe in the first part of the day we should be involved in Kriyas HaTorah, reading the Haftorah, Bakashas Rachamim, and only in the second half of the day, that's when we should be Ma'ayin Binyoni Ha'ir. Lo Salkadat Gemara rejects this. The Chsiv, it says in Ezra, with regard to the fast for the chait of the people, Shenasu Nashim Nakriyas, they were married out of the faith, and he declares, V'al ye'osvu kol chored b'dvar alokei Yisrael al ma'al hagola v'ani yoshev mishomem ad l'minchas ha'eretz. They would gather together, and they would recite Vidui, and they would reveal, the different sins, the terrible sins, and they would try to be mafresh them. And I would be silently, says Ezra, watching this with amazement. And this went on until Chatzos Hayom. until the midday, uksiv, and then it says in the next pasuk, u'b'minchas ha'erev kamti nitan nisi, ve'afresh efrasa kapai el Hashem Elokai. So in the second half of the day, from midday and on, that's called minchas ha'erev, he was mavakesh rachamim until the end of the day, until the evening, until nightfall. So from this we learn that when it says Reva Yom Korim B'Torah, B'Torah, and they were Vakish Rachmim Reva Yom, that's in the first half of the day, 1/4 of the day for Kriyas HaTorah and Haftorah, another quarter of the day for Bakoshes Rachmim. Now we get to the second half of the day, and during the course of the second half of the day, let's say a Rishon. Right. Just 1 second. What do you mean? Efrasa kapiel Hashem Elokai. He says here, B'chatzi hasheni shel hayom liachar minchas ha'erev bikesh rachamim ala erev ad ha'erev. So mikan yesh lilmod sherev hayom korim b'torah b'Torah v'rev hayom mevakshim rachamim. That's b'chatzi hasheni shel hayom. I stand corrected. In the first half of the day, that's when they were ma'ayin in the Yonei Ha'ir to make sure that there was no gezel, as we said before. And in the second half of the year of the day, that's when they were Kori B'Haftorah, the B'Torah Uba Haftorah, and then they were Vakesh Rach. So this is where we'll stop here with Omar Rafram Bar Papa. Wish you a great day.